Good evening, Eduardo Miguel Sanchez. Welcome on VH Berries.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
I am extremely grateful. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Just the end of my night here, and I've been looking forward to talking to you. So, everything's good.
Everything is good, and I found out that there are no letter T in the full name Eduardo Miguel Sanchez Quiros. And there should be a double T because you are the traveler.
That's right. That's right.
I would love Eduardo Sanchez to discuss about this latest release called Satanic Hispanics. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. Yeah. The it was it's an anthology movie, and it was I guess last year, about a year and a half ago. My friend Alejandro Brugues and Mike Mendez who are the producers of the movie. They called me and they were like, "Hey, do you want to be part of a anthology movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, sure." And then and I've been part of anthology movies before, but some have gone well, some have gone, not so well. So I decide, so I was, kind of on the fence, even though, they're my friends and I really wanted to do it. And then they told me the name of the movie, and it was going to be called Satanic Hispanics. And I was like, I'm in. And, how can you turn down a title like that? So, we shot my segment, I guess earlier this year, and it was called my segment's called El Vampiro, and it stars Hemke Madera, who I met on the show Queen of the South, and it was a great opportunity for us to do some comedy together. I've known Hemke for a while, and he usually does like very straight characters, but he has a really great sense of humor. And him and I have been wanting to do something together for a long time. And I asked him to do it, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so he loved the premise, and and then he came to Maryland, to where I live, to shoot it, and we did it, and the movie came out, I guess, last month, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. It's 5 films, and they're all really solid, and I was just really honored to be a part of that anthology.
You're very proud, Eduardo Sanchez, to be part of this anthology. And if I understood correctly, in this project, we can find 5 film directors, 5 stories, and probably 5,000 creative ideas.
Yeah, it really. I mean, it's Damian Rugna is one of the filmmakers, and Gigi Guerrero, and Alejandro Brugues, and Mike Mendez, and myself, and it's it was when you do an anthology, there's always this pressure of like, you gotta step up, and you don't want your movie to be the worst one of the group, but I can honestly say that all 5 of them are really solid. And Mike Mendez, who is the one that does he connects all the movies. He did an amazing job, putting them together. It's like one of the best wraparound, films of any anthology I've been a part of. I've ever seen. So it was cool. And again, yeah, I'm really proud to have been a part of it. And, hopefully there'll be Satanic Hispanics 2. And we can we can get the spotlight on some other, Latino filmmakers.
Bringing the spotlight, Eduardo Miguel Sanchez, on other Hispanic filmmakers. For example, next time, not bringing 5 directors, but 50 directors. I don't know how you're going to manage this very huge collaboration, but this is an upcoming challenge.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many great, Latino filmmakers out there, and it's, it'd be cool to kind of put a little, just like, again, like I said, like put the spotlight on some of them, these really talented people, and see what they can do.
See what they can do. And at the very beginning, I mentioned the double T, a character called the Traveler. Can you tell us who is the Traveler? And do you find some similarities between the Traveler and yourself?
The Traveler is the main character in the movie. He is the guy that basically ties all the other films together, and he's basically he's a man who made a deal with a demon, Santa Muerte, and he's immortal, but this thing is following him, and he has to keep moving, or else death basically gets him. So the whole movie, basically, he gets arrested at the beginning of the movie, and his whole movie is him trying to convince the cops that he needs to get out of there, and because death is coming their way. And besides being, I guess, Latino, him and I don't have much in common. He's you can tell he's a fighter, and he's seen some really crazy things in his life, and I've honestly been blessed to have had a pretty sheltered life. I came here from Cuba when I was about 5 years old, and my parents really, even though they were immigrants and they didn't have much, they really took really great care of us, and I've been blessed just to be part of the the American dream, and I became a filmmaker, which was crazy, and now I direct television shows. So I've been very blessed. So yeah, me and the Traveler have very very little in common, honestly.
Absolutely, Eduardo Sánchez. And one catchphrase that I really enjoyed in, for example, the trailer that is putting the spotlight on this feature film is all Hispanic AF. And I believe that AF means everything but autofocus.
Yes. No, it's definitely not out of focus. I think Gigi Soto Guerrero came up with that, the Hispanic AF. I mean, look, we wanted, with a title like Satanic Hispanics, it's not like we're trying to hide. So, we definitely wanted to kind of push and just kind of tell people that, this is a movie it's a crazy movie. It's definitely a crazy movie. And, I think people are enjoying it, and it's great to see the people's reactions when they watch it. So I think the tagline is very accurate.
The tagline is very accurate, Eduardo Sánchez, and you may not have the same characteristic as the Traveler, but this idea of and the word traveling is something that you can relate, because as you just mentioned, you went from Cuba to Washington, D.C. And I would love to discuss about those early days moving to the United States of America. Can you tell us a little bit more about this chapter?
Yeah, I was, we left Cuba when I was 2 years old, so I don't really remember anything about Cuba. And we went to Spain, because it was a little it was tricky to come straight to the United States. So we ended up in Spain for 3 years, and then eventually ended up in Washington, D.C., like you said. And, I mean, it was, basically I was, completely, I didn't know English, so I came here and I had to learn it. But I was very young, and I learned it pretty quickly. And, we, my parents, did the best they could. They were two immigrants, not particularly, educated, in any college or anything. So my dad was a contractor, and, he was a, very hard worker. In fact, he's still alive, and he's like 87, and he still wants to build stuff, and whatever he you ask him to do, he'll try to do it, even though he's kind of getting in his later years. And my mom just did whatever she could to support my dad, babysat kids. And so there were always this struggle, and there's always a lot of hard work. I grew up with, just my mom at home, but always working, always trying to make some money. And my dad, by the time he would an early riser, and he would come home late, and always working. He loved to work with his hands, and he was a pretty brilliant contractor, did a lot of things, built a lot of things. I used to help him in the summer. I was his assistant. I was a terrible assistant. But they taught me that, they were I just think that what they did was incredibly brave, and they taught me and I have a younger sister and an older sister, and they taught us just to kind of keep pushing forward. And, my mom, even though, they both came from very humble beginnings, like she really supported me, and for some reason, like, really supported my dream of being a filmmaker, even though it was a completely, stupid dream. It was, a ridiculous dream. And, I think most parents, especially, parents who come from humble, origins, they want you to, be a lawyer or an accountant or, a doctor, something that is steady, has steady work at least. And my mom was just someone who really supported me, even though she knew how hard it was going to be for me, and that, being a filmmaker was, just a dream that was probably not going to happen, But we made it, and luckily they're still alive, and they're living in Florida. And I learned, like, community. There was a lot of Hispanics in the community that I grew up in, and we took care of each other and watched out for each other. And it was great because I was basically living in Cuba at home, and then I would go to school and be full on in the United States. So it was kind of difficult for a little while, just kind of getting my footing. And I've never really felt 100% American or 100% Cuban. I feel like I'm kind of half and half, and I'm very proud of to be American, and I'm very proud to be Cuban. And it's given me kind of a unique perspective. I think the kind of the immigrant perspective of just, like, being able to see both sides of things, of not only the immigration issue, but of a lot of other issues, because, I lived both sides, So, it was definitely something, I always tell my parents, I'm like, you guys were so brave, and, like, I can't believe that you guys came to this country and, didn't know the language. They still don't know English, and just somehow made it, They raised 3 kids that are, pretty normal kids. I'm just so proud of them, and so happy that they made the decision to leave Cuba. At the time it was, there was a lot of, dark things happening, and the people of Cuba are still oppressed, and they figured we got to get our kids out of here. So I thank them every day for their brave decision to bring us to the United States.
Absolutely. This story is giving you a unique perspective, even as a film director, and in definitive, Eduardo Miguel Sánchez, a traveler, can be a passenger. And when you were traveling, you didn't do a stopover because you took a starship, and probably one from your favorite saga, which is Star Wars.
Yeah, and that's kind of me, yeah. I wish I could have, gotten in an X-wing fighter and come here. It's as you can see in my office, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and you can see my background. And that really was, Star Wars was really what got me into filmmaking, like, at least interested in filmmaking, and I was like 8 years old when the movie came out. And it just, like everybody else in the world, it just kind of blew our minds, and just inspired me to try to learn to just learn as much as possible about movies in general. So I owe a lot to Star Wars, and I've definitely given George Lucas and Lucasfilm enough of my own money through all the stuff that I've bought. But yeah, it's it's a lifelong passion of mine, and it's and my dream is to direct some kind of Star Wars TV show. My fingers are crossed that I can do that soon.
Your finger are crossed, Eduardo Miguel Sanchez, and you started in the United States of America, in that Washington, D.C. city. And you asked yourself at that time, how am I going to be a director? And at that time, what were your answers?
I mean, I was again, I watched Star Wars, and it kind of just blew my mind, and it really made me interested in, like, how would they do this, and it really gave me an idea of like how powerful the cinema was. And I've always been a movie lover. My dad loved movies, always took me to the movies, always watched movies on TV. Even though he doesn't speak English, he would he liked James Bond movies and anything action. Rambo is one of his favorite movies. But also he loves, comedy, like he loves Naked Gun and Airplane. So he taught me, and, he just through him just enjoying, movies. I think he just kind of, the bug kind of crossed over to me. I lived in Washington, D.C. There wasn't really any filmmaking, at least that I knew of, going on in Washington, D.C. Everything was L.A. or New York. And as a kid, as a Cuban kid, not much money, and, doing our best, the immigrant story here, it was, very, it was a dream. It was just like, something that I really didn't take seriously, even though I loved movies and I learned all about them, and I would try to make my own movies, and I would write these little short movies and try to shoot them, and it was much more difficult back then because there was no video. We had to try to do Super 8 and with Super 8 camera, and it was just, the film was so expensive, and it was just a really hard thing. So I never really took it seriously as far as like a career was concerned. But then in high school, I was about 16 years old, and they offered a television production class in my school, and I took it, I'm gonna see what this is all about. And the first day in the class, my teacher, and I remember this moment, his name was Pete Barron, and he was a social studies teacher that ended up he had worked at a TV station, so they were like, hey, you can teach the television production class. But he was a good teacher, and he basically just stood up there and said, look, this isn't really like about movie making. This is about television. And he told us all of the ideas, all the different jobs that you could get in the TV business, and in the film business. And he kind of opened my eyes to the idea that, like, hey, maybe this is actually really a career. And from that, like, I remember that moment, it was like a switch was hit in my head. It was like, I was like, I can do this. I can be a filmmaker. And obviously, I was, again, it was a dream, and I was definitely delusional. For certain, I was delusional, but it was just so much fun, and I just loved making little videos with my friends. And then I went to college and continued, and I learned to edit in high school, and I learned to shoot, and learned to start writing, and and it took me to Montgomery College in Maryland. And then from there, I went to the University of Central Florida in Orlando. And that's where, we started working with real film, and it became something, like really tangible, like, the plan to like make a film and, go to Sundance or go to another festival, sell it. And then, you had a career kind of following in the footsteps of, Robert Rodriguez and, Kevin Smith. And that's at UCF is where I met basically all the other four guys that I made Blair Witch Project with. And so, without UCF, Blair Witch probably wouldn't exist. And that's where I met Dan Myrick, who I wrote, I came up with the idea and I wrote the movie with him and directed it and then edited it later. And Rob Cowie was one of the producers, and Greg Hale was a kind of a producer / director, creative director. And then Mike Manello, who is the fifth partner who helped us make the film, and a lot of other people. I mean, there's a Ben Rock was also in UCF. There's a lot of people from UCF that that's really where the Blair Witch began, and we went and did the movie. We shot it in Maryland, and that was and that's why I'm talking to you right now. We made this movie and it went crazy. It blew up unexpectedly, and and I'm still kind of reaping the benefits of that little explosion that happened in 1999.
Professor Pete Baron changed the life of Eduardo Miguel Sanchez, and at the beginning of this next chapter, it started, as you just mentioned, with a project and a draft called The Woods movie. Can you tell us a little bit more about the genesis of this project with the four people that you just mentioned?
So, I was at University of Central Florida, and we were Dan Myrick and I were just hanging out. We were in the first year of the film program, and we were friends, and on weekends we just go watch movies or whatever. And we watched this movie called Freddy's Dead, which was a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it was a fun movie, but it wasn't very scary. It was a kind of a different, it was like it wasn't really like scary horror. It was like Roseanne Barr was in it and Tom Arnold, and that's pretty much all I remember of that movie. And so Dan and I came home, to my apartment, my townhouse, whatever. Well, I think it was a little townhouse that I lived in, and we were just like talking about the movies that scared us as kids, and we were wondering, like, there haven't really been, this was like early, like probably 1990. There hadn't been a lot of scary movies recently at that time, and we were just wondering, like, I wonder if you could make a scary movie. And we started talking about the movies that really affected us as kids, that we really loved as kids, that really scared us as kids. And we kind of got together and we went to the video store. There was a big video store that had all thousands of VHSs, and we rented a bunch of movies that we loved as kids. And we ended up really kind of focusing on this show called In Search Of, which was a show that was here in the United States in the late 70s and I think early 80s. And it was narrated by Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock in Star Trek. And it was a really creepy show because it was like a documentary show where it had like little half-hour episodes about Bigfoot and about UFOs and ghosts and Loch Ness Monster and, anything kind of paranormal, supernatural. And the way they kind of laid out the phenomena was that it was real. Like, they would interview people that had seen Bigfoot and that had been, supposedly abducted, and it had this really creepy music, and it had, Leonard Nimoy's narration, which was like, freaky. And both Dan and I were like, we really kind of came to the conclusion that was kind of the scariest thing that we, as kids, those kinds of shows that, the fake documentaries. There was also a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek, which is about Bigfoot. Just those kinds of things like really creeped us out. And I remember being a kid and just being, being so scared that I would have to switch the channel, I remember watching a Bigfoot documentary. I don't know if it was In Search Of or something else, because there was a lot of Bigfoot stuff in the 70s. It was, he was like a big star. And and I remember having to switch the channel because it was just freaking me out too much. And then I would watch something else for a little while, and then I would go back to the documentary. It would freak me out a little more, and then I would go, I would switch away. And so Dan and I were like, I wonder if you could do that, now, if you could do that with, with a modern audience. This is not, 25, well, actually more like 35 years ago. And we came up with this idea of like, imagine if it was like a film crew that went to examine, kind of like an In Search of film crew, doing a documentary about some kind of folklore, some kind of mythology, and we didn't know what it was. It was like, we knew that we wanted to go into the woods, and they're looking for some kind of legend that supposedly some, I remember the first kind of ideas was that there's some kind of hermit or some kind of witch that lives, that supposedly some woman that is seen in the town every once in a while, and then they go up there to try to find this, witch or this, wizard or whatever it was. And they disappear. And then a few, years later, their footage is found, and it tells this story of these documentary filmmakers that went into the woods and just basically something was hunting them, and they disappeared. So that was the initial idea. That was like the idea that we came up with like that first weekend. And I remember like the idea of having, of ending the movie in a house. That was like a very early idea. Like they end up in this creepy house, and, our thing, the camera continues into the house, and we were just thinking like it would be so scary because the audience, there's no way to predict what's going to happen. It was kind of one of these movies that you couldn't really tell, that gave no, gave no clues as to what was going to happen, and we just thought, we loved that idea. We just were like, oh my God, this is great. And we kept developing it and kept talking about it. But both Dan and I had other films that we were doing, and we were trying to graduate from school. And, I eventually moved back to Maryland, and he stayed in Orlando and tried to, we did another feature together, and, we just got busy, and we kind of forgot about, the Woods movie. And then in 1996, like, 5 or 6 years after we came up with the idea, I was here in Maryland, and I was, in my mid to late 20s, and I was in this dead end job. And I remember being in traffic, in DC, and just like what am I doing? So I grabbed the cell phone and I called Dan. I said, Dan, dude, I'm getting to the end of my rope here. Let's try to do the Woods movie. Let's go out and do it. And he was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So, we kind of got the ball rolling, and there was a guy that we went to film school with his name was Greg Hale, and he was a really great filmmaker. He was like one of the best student filmmakers at the school. And Dan and him were trying to write a script together, and Dan was like, hey, Ed called me and reminded me of this movie that we have and that we came up with in film school. And it's called The Woods Movie. And he pitched the story to Greg, and Greg was like, I'm in, oh my God, I love this so much. And Greg, not only was he a pretty good director, but he was really he's a great producer. And he was like, look, I'll produce it. You guys direct it and write it. And he put in a little bit of his own money, and he kind of got the ball rolling. He really was the guy that, started pushing us to get auditions going. And so I traveled to New York to audition some actors. And then eventually we involved a guy named Rob Cowie, who we also had gone to film school with, and he was supposed to bring in the money. And then we had another guy that we had gone to film school named Mike Manello, who was he was a good friend of mine in film school, and he was working for a theater in Florida that ran this thing called the Florida Film Festival, which is a big festival in Florida. And he had a lot of knowledge. Like, he had been to Sundance, and he knew kind of the festival thing, and he knew what kinds of movies were hot, and he just had a lot of knowledge. So this kind of group this little group of five guys, just basically, we kind of got down to business and just somehow figured out a way to make this movie, raise some money, and then came up with the idea, and wrote the script and cast it, and then we finally shot it in October of 1997 here in Maryland. And and kind of the rest is history. But it was definitely started at it all started at UCF. Just by being in film school together. And I tell people, I tell student filmmakers and young filmmakers, like, when you go to film school, it's very competitive, and you want to be the best, and there's definitely like rivalries, but be sure to filmmaking is very collaborative, and you have more to learn from other people by working with them than by separating yourself from them. So, I tell people, like, just, try to form the bonds in film school, because, without film school, I wouldn't be here talking to you. There would be no Blair Witch Project if I hadn't gone to UCF.
Creating a bond with all the other students that is going to create the connection, Eduardo Miguel Sanchez, between Maryland and Orlando. And I believe that you're grateful for two very specific elements, which are the satellite and the phone plan that allowed you to make that phone call to your friend. And secondly, the remote control on the corner of your sofa, because this is the reason why you love television. And by doing the Blair Witch Project, you also became an ambassador of the little village of Burkittsville. Can you tell us a little bit more about this very special status as an ambassador?
Well, yeah, I guess I am an ambassador. It was, when Dan and I, because, the movie is basically about this, this woman named Ellie Kedward that was, she was, they thought she was a witch, and she was tried for witchcraft, and she was, led off into the woods, and they tied her to a tree in the middle of the winter, and basically she died out there. And there was this town called Blair, during that winter, the people in the town started dying. The kids started, dying. That it was basically the town was cursed because they had, killed this woman. And basically people started talking about, this is the Blair Witch, had destroyed the township of Blair. And by the next summer, in the spring, when people came to see, to go to Blair, everybody was dead. It was the town was abandoned, and nobody knew what happened to the people that lived in Blair. So Blair was abandoned, and then in the same place that Blair, this Blair town was built, a town called Burkittsville in 1824, I think, was founded right on the site of Blair, and all of that is a lie, other than the town of Burkittsville. There's a real town called Burkittsville. The rest of it was just all made up by us, as part of the folklore and as part of the mythology of the movie of the Blair Witch. And Dan, I remember Dan and I we drove around Maryland looking for locations, and we found this beautiful little town near in Frederick County. Actually, I still live like 20 minutes from Burkittsville, and we were like, oh my God, that's a perfect town, and when we were like, okay, so now we're gonna make this up that this Burkittsville was Blair, and and we didn't really think much of it. We were like, that's just the background of the movie. So we used the real town, and later on, very, to our surprise, the movie blew up and became very popular. And this township of Blair, of Burkittsville, which is very small. I mean, the thing about Burkittsville is that if you live in Burkittsville, you don't want to be around, you're basically out there to isolate yourself. Like there isn't much, it's basically just one street. And the Blair Witch fans, especially on Halloween, started coming out to Burkittsville, and they stole the signs, and they, there was some I mean, it's funny now, but it was not funny back then. They vandalized a little bit of I think they vandalized the cemetery, and, they went up there looking for the Blair Witch, and this was all to our surprise and to our horror, because we were like, we never wanted, first of all, obviously we never expected the movie to be so popular that Burkittsville was going to, we never thought that it was going to be inundated with people, harassing the locals, or else, we would have just made up the town and just, called it something else. So we had no idea that the movie was going to be so huge and bring this kind of curse to Burkittsville. So, the whole ambassador thing for a long time, Burkittsville kind of hated us. I remember meeting, years later with the mayor of Burkittsville, and she had lived through the whole Blair Witch thing, and she said that it was just people were just walking around, and people for some reason thought that this was a movie set. They were going into people's homes, and and I don't know exactly what happened, but there's definitely, they definitely stole the signs, and we actually paid for the signs to be replaced, and then those signs were stolen. So we were not popular there. So I was like the opposite of an ambassador. I was like a public enemy of Burkittsville. But then recently, and the story ends with a good ending. Actually, just this year, they have a new mayor in Burkittsville, and he's a really huge fan of Blair Witch, and he he kind of wanted to heal the wounds of between us and the township of Burkittsville. So we actually, like this year we did a screening of Blair Witch Project in Burkittsville for the first time ever. And I never thought in a million years that we were going to be doing a showing of Blair Witch, in Burkittsville. I thought that was, that we were going to be enemies, and that we were going to be kind of, forbidden to show the movie there forever. But he made it part of it was a fundraiser for the cemetery. And it sold out, and it was a really nice event. And now he's thinking of doing it every year. And next year is the 25th anniversary. So, we're going to do something cool there. And, and like I said, I live like 20 minutes from Burkittsville. So we went with all my friends, and it was a cool time. It was, people still love this movie, and it was just really special to be able to share the movie and to talk to people, in Burkittsville. So, and I guess now, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe you can call me an ambassador now, but I still feel like, a certain remorse for messing up, these people's lives for a little while. And hopefully that, that's kind of stopped. They say that people still go out there on Halloween. But hopefully people are more respectful and they don't bother the residents of Burkittsville anymore. But yeah, I guess I am kind of sort of an ambassador to Burkittsville.
It was a cool time with Mayor Michael J. Robinson.
That's right.
And I was actually going to question your ability and quality as an ambassador, because the purpose of an ambassador is to bring more people that are going to live in the village of Burkittsville. Yeah. But the contrary is happening, because from 1870, we had 293 inhabitants, and at the latest census in 2020, we counted only 142 inhabitants. This is a large decrease, and I am questioning
Yeah.
Eduardo Miguel Sanchez as an ambassador.
Yeah, like I said, I'm kind of the opposite of an ambassador. I mean, like I said, like people, and that was the whole kind of sad thing about it, is that the people of Burkittsville were there to just basically be away from any kind of spotlight, any kind of craziness, and unfortunately the movie gave them that bit of infamy. So hopefully they forgive me, and hopefully, I mean, it's a beautiful place, hopefully that, more people start moving in. But I think I honestly feel that like they want it that way. They want it to be, they don't want, any development, and they want it to keep it that small. So I think they're happy with the number of residents right now.
Absolutely. Eduardo Miguel Sanchez, the city is happy with the number of inhabitants currently living in that village. And you created, through this saga, very powerful references with Mr. Punctuality, by putting some songs such as Rigor by Digging
Lilies.
Lilies.
Digging Lilies.
And in conclusion, how do you see the evolution of horror? Because this is a genre that you are appreciating a lot. What is, for you, the future of horror?
I don't know, and that's really what is exciting. There are definitely some great younger horror filmmakers that are making really great movies. I think that there's more diversity now. There's more women horror filmmakers that we are kind of welcoming into the fold, and also just diversity. There's more just general more diverse stories being told. At least we're pushing that way, and that was part of why we thought Satanic Hispanics was important, is just to kind of push that idea that there are different voices out there telling these horror stories. But for me, the future, I believe that the future of horror is strong. I think it's a genre that has a very fanatical base, of people that appreciate it. There are people that literally watch every horror movie that comes out. They live this thing. Halloween is getting more and more popular in the United States. I don't know if that's the way it is over there too, but it seems like it's becoming almost as popular as Christmas, and people really enjoy it, and they kind of enjoy safely delving into the dark side of humanity. And I think horror movies give people that release, give people that they show people something dark, but it's safe because you're at home or you're in a movie theater. And I think, and it's just, people love that. I mean, so the audience is very strong. And I think that, I'm pretty sure there's more horror movies being made than there ever have been. The whole idea of the digital revolution, where people are making movies, with their phones. I think it's a great thing. I mean, even though it does create a lot of clutter, it does give opportunity to people that, before, like when I was young, there wasn't this, we had to make a movie, you had to either, you definitely had to have some money, but you had to know how to, find a film camera and then film. And it was very much a very complicated process. And now, anybody can make a movie, and anybody can edit a movie on their computers. So, I think the genre is strong, and I really look forward to, the new stuff that's coming out. And I think that there's, horror lets people, I think the innovation, I think, comes from indie horror, and then the lack of of funds and the lack of resources makes people, makes the filmmakers, kind of like what we did with Blair Witch. We didn't have the money, so you had to creatively kind of create, make something that was, that people wanted to see. And I think that type of creativity, especially in horror, is very strong. There's some of the most innovative films are horror films these days, especially indie horror films. So I feel that there's a lot of creativity and it's it's kind of wide open, and I really look forward to seeing more horror, and it's, what I love about horror also is that there's all kinds of different types of horror. It's one of the only, probably the only genre that has, dozens of subgenres, so you have, drama horror, and you have comedy horror, you have action horror, like even just Satanic Hispanics, runs the gamut of, serious horror, dramatic horror, and then, goofy horror, action horror, so it definitely, has a lot of things to offer different people. And I know, like, my favorite subgenre is the action comedy, like Evil Dead 2 is one of my favorite horror films. But that type of kind of, approach I've always loved. And that's why in my movie Vampiro is very much kind of an homage a little bit, I think, to Evil Dead 2, or at least that style of filmmaking. So, I think the sky's the limit with horror, and I'm really excited about the future.
The audiences, the genre, and the demand is going strong. And as a matter of fact, nobody knows the future of horror. Exactly like the improvisational nature of the Blair Witch super saga, and also of the Satanic Hispanic feature film. Thank you very much, Eduardo Miguel Sanchez Quiros.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.